Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into my presentation today on how to streamline your data stack with Slack. I'm excited to introduce this idea of how Slack can fit into a company's tech stack because I think there's a lot of uncharted territory to explore here. Now, when I say streamline, I do want to be clear. We're likely not replacing any tools you already use. I'm definitely not calling for, I don't know, coding in Slack, though I've seen folks using Notepad that way, and I'm never sure if I should be impressed or afraid of that. But I do think you should consider using Slack to quickly and easily turn data into business outcomes by adding an interface layer so simple that even the least technical people in your company can make data-driven decisions without typing a single line of code. And you can build it right where you and your colleagues already work together. We'll start with a quick round of introductions and then jump right into the foundation of Slack technical implementations, Slack apps. We'll ladder up from off-the-shelf solutions into customization, where we'll explore an example of a many-step data product pipeline that we were still able to wrap up into a few simple Slack steps. Finally, we'll look at how these apps can drive business impact. And hey, maybe you'll see opportunities in some of the work you do every day. But first things first. Hello, I'm Ryan Kinney, and I'm a senior data engineer on Slack's data engineering and architecture team. My pronouns are he, him, his. I live in foggy Pacifica, California, just south of San Francisco. I started my career in finance. I can't see you, but I can feel you cringe a little as I say that. It all felt unnecessarily complicated and inconvenient. And looking back, it wasn't even really satisfying, because it didn't offer me a lot of room to build or make things. That's not really what finance is about. I also have a creative bent, but apparently creativity is frowned upon when you're working with financials. Who knew? But data engineering is different. While data is complex and messy, data engineers can get their hands dirty and build processes and pipelines that make it simple. There's something really satisfying about building a machine that separates signal from noise, and data engineers are a big part of that. Sometimes all of it. Data is information, and an important bit of engineering is making stuff move. But data engineers don't just move information from A to B. We help give data a voice. We help draw meaning from its message. My talk today is about streamlining your data stack with Slack. So I think it's important to bear in mind that data has a message, and messages are a form of data. At its heart, Slack is a messaging platform, so you might find it weird to consider it part of your tech stack. But it turns out Slack is really good for sending and receiving messages. Even messages like this. So let's talk about Slack apps. Valuable time gets lost switching and toggling, opening and closing, logging in and logging out of things. And it's not just time spent that's the problem. You lose your focus when your flow gets interrupted like this. Actually, there was a study done by the Federal Aviation Administration and the University of Michigan, which found that even brief mental blocks created by shifting between tasks can cost as much as 40% of someone's productive time. That's crazy. Slack apps can save you time and focus. They're the lifeblood of any effort to streamline operations in Slack. Off-the-shelf apps and integrations reduce context switching to keep your work all in one place. Custom development and integrations give you the flexibility to build whatever your stack requires. So Before we get into the more technical stuff, I'll start with a quick glance at some useful, off-the-shelf apps to improve your operations just by recapturing some of that lost productive time. Then we'll look at customization options and how we've used some of them to more seamlessly support teams across Slack with the data that they need. Right off the bat, let's discuss Jira. For a distressingly long time, it was hard for me to see the value of Jira. I just wanted to focus on the work. As I've gotten more experienced, and especially when I've tried working without it, I've come to appreciate the value it can bring to the table. But I still get frustrated when I have to stop what I'm doing and go work with Jira in another tab or window somewhere. Even though it's just an integration, the Jira Slack app has been a huge help. With it, you can take care of all kinds of Jira chores, like creating, managing, and closing tickets, previewing tickets from just a link somebody sends you, and receiving alerts whenever important changes are made to your issues. In the image here, a user creates a Jira ticket in Slack regarding an issue brought up in a normal conversation. There's a lot of ways to set this up, but the important thing is it's done right where the conversation was already taking place. You can even take the workflow in this image here one step further. We set up a ticket reaction that converts a conversation thread into a mirrored Jira ticket without all the button clicks. So your bug fix conversations are available in Slack search, but they retain the context of the Jira issue they were tied to. Pretty handy. Version control is something I definitely don't recommend trying in Slack. I don't even really know how that would work, but you can easily pair Slack up with popular tools like GitHub to keep your code conversations in Slack where the rest of your conversations already live. As with Jira, your reviews and updates can be synced across platforms, so you barely need to leave Slack to get your work done. You can notify when a pull request requires your feedback or changes status. You can merge and revert commits or address issues like in the first image here. You can schedule, track, and cancel deployments. You can preview new commits and pull requests with a link. And even you can reference specific lines of code like shown in the second image. But enough fluff. Let's talk about something really important. The most business critical integration, Giphy. You can add GIFs to a channel or DM with just a / command. You can shuffle through a bunch of matches to your text until you find the perfect GIF. Or you can awkwardly cancel it when none of them quite match what you were going for. If you're looking to build on this, please remember, you don't mess with perfection. But we're really here to talk data, so let's look at Looker. The Looker app lets you bring all of your Looker-defined metrics and dashboards straight into Slack. This makes sharing information fast and easy. You can send those Looker-defined metrics and data to Slack to share them with other people. You can schedule reports and templated message deliveries. You can even show your work with visualization dashboards or raw CSV dumps. We'll demonstrate some of these capabilities a little later on. And that brings us to the fun part, building your own things. Slack is a pretty open development platform, whether you're customizing existing integrations or building new Slack apps from scratch. We've got webhooks that let you connect almost any outside process. You can push messages based on outside events, for example, for alerts or notifications. You can kick off outside processes whenever Slack events occur. You can create message templates and parameters, and populate them with data. And you can tie algorithms to a bot user to create a conversational interface or to allow more flexible messaging and reports. So let's dig a little deeper into a few of those things. Welcome to the rise of the machines. A Slack bot is an app that has been assigned a user account in your Slack workspace. It's an app in user's skin, clothing, with the ability to interact in certain channels however you programmed it to, and hopefully no further. You can create a bot by adding a bot user through your app's settings page. You'll then need to set up its events API request URL and subscribe it to events relevant to your bot, like app mention to respond anytime it's @mentioned, or messages.channel, which sends messages when events happen in a given channel. That may sound like a lot of setup, but Slack's documentation makes it pretty easy. Check it out at api.slack.com. Even relatively simple bots can be really helpful. Some bots, like alerts and notifications, are configured to only send messages. They'll ping a channel when something happens, with a common use case being failures in your ETL tool. Say one of your Airflow DAGs had a task fail. You can fancy up those messages however you like, including @mentions so relevant users get pinged, and links to the failing DAG's Airflow page for troubleshooting. Bots can also be set up to send templated messages at certain times or dates. These are really useful for regular reporting, like period-end financials or key metric and KPI tracking. Such reports require that the metrics in question be predefined, usually in a data warehouse table or view, or some other data tool, like Looker. Connecting these outside tools to Slack streamlines the experience for your users, letting them access critical reports and data without leaving their Slack workspace. More importantly, from an operations perspective, it locks in metric definitions, reducing confusion and establishing a source of truth people can trust. I wish I could count the number of times someone came to me with some metric value that didn't match, and they got it from an ancient query or metric definition. This prevents all that from happening. It also reduces the need for data team members to generate these reports on a recurring basis, and it can be expanded to common ad hoc requests or whatever you feel is worth the effort. Finally, bots can receive input from users and respond accordingly. This usually requires reading a channel or DMs to the bot, but it can also be handled through the Slack app's UI. It's surprisingly easy to get one of these started. This example demonstrates the basic approach to bot interactivity. While no-code options like /commands and block-kit interfaces are available, chatbots are also a popular approach to bringing your data to Slack. Since the code lives outside of Slack and can be hosted basically anywhere you want, you can extend your data stack into Slack itself. Users can ask a bot a question, and the bot can query databases or other applications and deliver the insights the user needs. You can supply any simple or complex interpretation engine and attach any metric definition or data that seems appropriate. Even full-blown reports can be delivered on demand in the format of the user's choosing. From the user's perspective, the entire data stack is right there at their fingertips without needing to understand how any of it works. From the engineer or analyst perspective, the many steps often required to identify, query, transform, visualize, describe, and deliver data are consolidated into a single Slack workflow. In the example on the right here, a bot listens to its pre-selected channel for an @ mention. Once it's mentioned in a message, it checks that the message is a request for a joke, and then it does something. You can use this basic framework and extend it to almost any level of interactivity or complexity that you want. Actually, it gets even easier. Slack has its own development library, Bolt, full of helpful functions to manage your Slack apps. Bolt is a fast way to start programming with the Slack platform, and it's available in JavaScript, Python, or Java. Since we use Python for our development efforts, we would get started with pip install slack_bolt. Bolt has a lot of convenient functions for Slack app creation and interaction, and it wraps up some of those ugly API commands in more intuitive objects and methods like say. It lets you easily listen to real-time events with decorators like @app_event, respond to slash commands, and compose rich, interactive messages with BlockKit without having to do those raw API calls. As you can see, after a few lines of code for initial app setup, it's easy to create a starter function that sends a message to a channel every time someone new joins your Slack workspace. Declare that a user joining is an event of interest, assign a few values for your parameterized greeting, and execute say. Bolt handles the rest. So, how can we really push bots to their limit? I haven't gone into a lot of depth here yet, because there's already a lot of tutorials readily available for most basic use cases like these. So let's put together some of these pieces we've discussed and explore the architecture of something more complicated, a bot built on integrations to automate complex data processes with a simple user experience. Midas Touch is an application developed in Slack to make the life of sales representatives and the analysts they work with easier. It has fundamentally changed the way our sales and success org consumes and leverages data. There's a few implementations we can talk about. We built Midas on the Django framework in Python, which gave us database support and a robust admin site out of the box. Django's REST API layer allows external systems to post to the application, and it's all hosted on our enterprise Heroku account, which allows us to easily deploy and scale. Now, I introduced Bolt a few minutes ago, and we use it all over the place here. We were able to install Bolt for Python right alongside Django as the layer where we handle Slack events, generate UI components, and deliver Slack messages. Midas Touch, the app, has a few different use cases handled by bots and connected apps that I'll discuss today. Let's start with reporting to sales representatives through Midas Slides. One implementation of Midas Touch is Midas Slides. Slides is an initiative to automate the process of preparing data-driven slide decks for account executives and customer success managers to use in their prospecting and client meetings. This includes not only building the actual presentation, but the data work of pulling the right data, analyzing the trends to understand the company's situation and needs, turning those trends into compelling graphs and visuals, and then putting together those pieces to figure out a solution for whatever challenge they might be having. Midas Slides replaces all of that. A user starts a Midas Slides request with a text command in Slack, /Midas, sent to Workbot. They're connected with Salesforce integrations to a list of accounts, and they select the account they want slides for. This request gets passed to Looker, which produces CSV summaries of each dashboard, chart, or metric, zips them up, and sends that zip file to our integrations management tool, Workato, via a webhook. Workato calls a REST API endpoint from the core Midas Touch app, triggering a background Celery task. Celery creates new copies of the slide templates in Google Drive, opens the CSVs, and decodes them into a master mapping sheet. The mapping sheet determines how the values will be distributed to the appropriate charts within the slides template. And those finished slides are shared with the user in a Slack DM via the Google Drive API. That's 9 applications talking data to each other. How does a sales rep navigate such a process? Well, it's pretty easy. Here's how it looks from their perspective. Generating slides for the fictional account Acme Corp. Notice how smooth the process is. And in just a few short minutes, their slides will be ready. Each slide is chock full of compelling metrics and graphics that tell the story of the requested account. The user can add their own slides for additional context, specific to a given account when it's needed. But the default slides give them a huge head start. Most of the time, it's all they need. Midas Slides is so popular, it's used to generate roughly 500 slide decks per week. Each deck generated saves sales folks around 2 to 3 hours of time they would have spent on everything I discussed before. Clocking in with over 1,000 hours per week saved, it's a pretty big deal. And we aren't just cutting costs either. Slides are produced for almost 80% of our quarterly invoiced ACV, driving new deal revenue. It's no wonder virtually every sales rep in the company uses the tool. And that leads me to an important point of how data teams ought to contribute to their organizations. Driving impact. Far too often, the connection between data operations and business outcomes is unclear, or it doesn't even exist. As data ops professionals, we have an obligation to build and work with tools that enable our colleagues to make the data-driven decisions that lead to success. Sometimes you might have leadership who won't budge, but a lot of times it's us who aren't building the right tools, or we aren't properly realizing the impact that we could be making if we looked past just cutting costs and automating existing processes. So let's talk about that. Hard work is really frustrating for everyone on a team when it doesn't have any impact. We all want to share in our organization's success, but it's easy to feel left out when the ship looks rudderless. Data teams can find themselves on the outside looking in if they aren't proactive. Organizations have a real edge when their data teams can efficiently turn noise into actionable messages. And that requires moving at the speed of Slack. Great buzzwords, Ryan, but what does that really mean? Let's return to Midas, this time in the form of signals. Midas Signals is another offspring of the Midas Touch app. It monitors account activity and proactively suggests actions and opportunities to account and success managers. Here's how it works. Frank, one of our AEs, sets up this channel for his book of business and subscribes to Midas Signals using our bot's modal interface. He selects notifications for either a single account or his entire book of business. He invites his colleagues to use this channel to communicate about his accounts. Now, whenever a key contact from the account does a specific action, in this case, attending a field marketing event, Midas will send a notification to his channel with the contact's information along with some recommended next steps to take. So, as you can see, this process encourages our reps to coordinate in channels to take immediate action on those activities. Now, say Frank receives a ping from Midas that use of a popular Slack feature has steadily declined since their last call. He can follow a link within the message to his account dashboard, where he can see other trends about their activity. He knows which accounts require attention without having to constantly go check in on them himself. And when he's ready to schedule his next call, he knows what to follow up on. The agenda is driven by the data. How do we do it? Well, the good news is that the Midas Touch architecture was already in place. So that piece at the bottom might look familiar. Like its slide's predecessor, Signals leverages a basic Salesforce integration to subscribe to a given account signals. It tracks specific customer actions in Salesforce, and it can access other account data, such as product usage activity, from our Snowflake data warehouse. Instead of representing past activity with visualizations, now we're driving future activity with insights and suggestions. Pretty cool. Our sales team loves it. They estimate that Midas Signals saves them over 5,000 hours a month in prioritizing accounts and tracking down contacts. And it effortlessly drives new deals by surfacing high-propensity accounts right when they're ready to take the next step. With a little bit of thought, I'm sure you can think of some innovative ways to incorporate Slack into your own data stack. Not only will it make your work easier and reduce the disruptions that come from context switching, but it can drive measurable business impacts by rendering your data more accessible to the people who need it. So let's recap all the ground we covered today. We looked at the foundations of Slack apps, integrations, and how they bring other tools into Slack, saving us time and focus. We checked out Bolt and how smooth it can make Slack app development. And we talked about different kinds of bots, event-driven, scheduled, and interactive, and just a few of the ways they can bring our apps alive. We explored the different iterations of Midas at Slack, a classic case study for automation, where we were able to build a customized solution that cuts through the crud and virtually eliminates a tedious process that needlessly pulled salespeople out of their areas of expertise. And we talked through how Slack apps go beyond simple cost cutting to driving real business results with Midas signals, uncovering data-driven insights that proactively drive revenue and growth. I hope at least a little bit of this struck a chord and encouraged you somehow to try Slack apps for yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in for this presentation. And thank you to Unravel and the entire DataOps Unleashed team for having me. If you have any questions, feedback, snide remarks, goofy gifs, or you just want to talk more about anything data, reach out. You can email me at rkinney@slackcorp.com or find me on LinkedIn at Ryan-M-Kinney. I also take Slack Connect invites, which is a little more on brand. Thank you.